Yeah, well, it's pretty important to have a stable society to be able to do much. I mean, we do recognize this most definitely, and so our long-term goals are guaranteed living income. It's something that's been talked about for a long time, and I can say with pretty good confidence that it's going to be in everyone's platform in probably in the next election. But we have immediate needs too, right? So the immediate needs, how we see we could stabilize things socially right now is through several different projects. One is pharmacare. Mm-hmm. We know that pharmacare, healthcare, for example, used to be 95% publicly funded in our country. That's back in the 80s when every other country wanted to be like us because we had the best healthcare system in the world. But today that's less than 70%. So that other 30%'s got to come somewhere, and it comes out of our pockets, helping to make things unaffordable and having this whole affordability issue right now. But we also have national child care, and we also have free post-secondary education. Those are a few of the social issues. And of course, housing everything is at a bottom right now, whether it's housing, transit, transportation, education, healthcare, and of course the environment, or the state of our environment. And that's largely because the other three parties, the status quo parties, seem to be so focused on, as Greta Thunberg put it, a young woman with a lot of wisdom, mm-hmm. This eternal fairy tale of endless growth, because they're paying attention to GDP when they should be paying attention to our well-being. This is what the Green Party how it's so different from the other parties is. We want a government that measures well-being. Yeah. That would be nice.
And for those who don't know what the gross domestic product, the GDP, what it is variable. Basically, that just tells people how much we spend. Really,
how much money is in circulation through our and we hear from the blue and the red guys that it's improving every year. We see growth in GDP, and the unemployment rates are the lowest than ever. But what they're failing to see is that all those social outcomes have hit a bottom, right? Mm-hmm. And we're in crisis mode and everything.
As far as the quality of life,
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Income and wealth inequality has hit a level where no one alive today has actually ever experienced, in our country. Mm-hmm. So these are the kind of measures that are really important to all of us, and yet they are still attached to that constant growth, that endless wheel of consumption, mm-hmm. that's going to kind of take us out of this. But it's actually brought us further and further into it. Even the IMF, I just read an article that said trickle-down economics is a colossal failure.
Yes.
And so this is what we are still attached to, and the reason why we're attached to it is, quite frankly, we have successive governments that are beholden to special interests and not to us. So their own corporate constituents, I would call them. Yeah. But on that note, though, too, could you speak more to the universal income, the guaranteed
solution? Yeah, the guaranteed universal income, because not everybody understands its concepts, because they feel like, it's going to become a nanny state, and oh my God, it's going to be complete socialism. But could you speak more into that to speak to the fears of Canadians who
well, I mean, right now we already spend billions and billions of dollars in our social safety infrastructure, but the problem is most of that money either gets trapped in bureaucracy or administration and doesn't really trickle down to the people that it's trying to help, and we have so much overlap and band-aids here and band-aids there, and so there's a lot of money actually being spent right now, and we just say let's consolidate that and give people the security that they need. There's other very important reasons that this is something we're thinking about right now too, which is, Greens are always further ahead. We're always looking forward, and we see AI, artificial intelligence, and automation and disruptive technologies as being a real threat to many professions, and and that's why we have that combination of guaranteed living income and free post-secondary education in college and training, because we're going to see that there's people that are going to need to transition into new jobs, either through the new technology or through the transition that we really need in terms of getting off of oil and gas and coal and onto renewables. So we need the supports in place for people to just transition towards these new positions. And so the guaranteed living income puts a roof over your head and gives you food to eat, while the free education gets you retrained. And we see those two as being integral in moving forward, because there will be certain generations of Canadians that are going to be in transition.
Yeah, and it's because a lot of the machination happening too. There's also this, like you were saying, the technology and this. So if we're going to be evolving, I guess, into this new, if we're going to still have an economic system like in neoclassical economics, we need something to sustain the average populace. And with the amount of population that we have and the amount of dwindling of jobs, I guess that's basically what you're looking at, as something to at least sustain us. But there is some models that we do know that we've seen that actually work. So some people would say, oh, we're just going to become all lazy and everybody's going to do nothing and blah, blah, blah. Well, we have some models that have been actually exercised here in Canada where, of course, some of it's been cut now by some conservative parties. But the data so far shows that that it's been outstanding transformation in some of these people's lives. That having just the source of income to provide for at least rent and, the cost of living, that they were able to excel and then go for a job and become, and you've had your own success stories as well, as about one of the librarians you were talking about.
Yeah, that was neat. That was in the 70s in Manitoba. There was a pretty long project going on. I believe it ended up being a 4-year project. And when the Conservative government came in at the time, they just quashed it and actually took all the data that had been collected over the years and buried it. But some researcher, I read an article where a researcher did find these boxes, these 21 boxes that were unmarked, with all kinds of paper in it. And she went through them, and she was able to find someone who actually went through the program back in the 70s, and she got a hold of her. Yeah. And it was an amazing story. It was a single mom who had, I believe, two children, and at the time the system was saying, stay on welfare, we'll take care of you, which and she was like, but no, I want to learn, I want to better myself and take care of myself. And so this pilot project happened to come to her area of the world, and she was able to be a part of it. And what did she do? She had the supports in place for her to feed herself and her children and house them, and get some training. She went to school. She had a dream to become a librarian, so she went to school to become a librarian, and years later she became the head librarian in her community. And one, what an amazing story. So, that's how this works. It's about opportunity. It's about giving people the supports that they need to thrive.
I guess because of the. So universal income is the beginning of a bad rap, actually, I believe, because the data so far shows the complete opposite of how people are reacting to it. So I'm so glad to hear the Green Party of Canada wanting to adopt this, even in Canada, especially in times of crisis. Now, and some of the crises we're talking about is also the environment. Let's talk about the environment. We are noticing, like, everybody's very confused about the issue. Some people want to open up the discussion about the environment. Some people are saying, well, we don't want to take marching orders by, the United Nations. And some people say we don't, is it a crisis or not a crisis? Would you ever be open with the Green Party? Because I know the data's out there. Would you guys be open? Would somebody be open to a huge debate, like, amongst these scientists? Wouldn't that be a cool thing to just like nail in the coffin and say, okay, enough now. Let's have one day, just argue the shit out of it, show the data, and say, like a court of law type of thing. I
think you'd have a pretty tough time finding scientists that would say that it's not happening. So, I don't think it's quite a debate anymore. All the top science, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the people who have been responsible for giving us this information, are all the top scientists in the world. In Canada, in Canadian, Andrew Weavers, who's the leader of the Green Party in BC, he's an IPCC scientist for Canada. He's a climatologist.
That's right.
These are the most respected people. These are the professionals that we have to consult us.
That's right.
And so if you can find scientists that are saying otherwise, that aren't paid by oil companies or some special interest to BS us, basically, and prevent any kind of action,
Would their egos be on both sides though?
I'm sorry?
Would there be that type of egos on both sides, where even the members of the IPCC or certain scientists would have their own egos saying, they have their own special interests, saying, hey, I have, investments in windmills, or I have investments in solar panels, or you see, for me, I'm pretty convinced that there is an issue. Okay, I'm pretty convinced about it. I'm not wavering on the issue. I think it has to be addressed. It has to be completely addressed. But the crisis, how do you convince Canadians right now?
I don't think you have to. I mean, last year we had, in Toronto, we're here in Toronto right now. Last year we had one day of rain that cost us $80 million. $80 million. That's one day. That's the cost of inaction.
Yeah, that's right.
In the springtime, we had we had 13 simultaneous states of emergency due to floods.
Yeah.
That's cost us millions and millions of dollars. That displaced thousands of people. That's the cost of inaction.
That's the cost.
We've already, the IPCC last year warned us that if we continue on the way we're going right now with the pathetic targets that we have, which Canada's not even going to reach those pathetic targets, we can expect 3-degree warming. When there was a mile of ice right here in this studio, during the Ice Age, the difference between global climate or change was only 5 degrees. We've already changed it by 1. Okay, so we're on our way. We've already started climate change.
It's
That's
like
happening.
in the last 20 years, we change it quite quickly. That's what's going on too.
We started in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, so 150 years ago. But the intensification really began about 25 to 30 years ago. We did most of the damage. Now we're not feeling that yet. See, because climate is long-term trends, right?
Yeah.
And where weather is what's happening during today.
Okay, I see.
So that's the difference. So climate change means climate patterns will change over time. And so we haven't felt the wrath of what we've done in the last 20 years yet. So that's still to come. And and we have a moral. This isn't just an economic or a political topic. This is very much a moral topic. I mean,
that's right.
For 2 reasons. One, the people who had the least to do with this are going to suffer the most. We're talking about the poor, even in our community, but more so the poor countries around the world who today are seeing oceans rising, and Indonesia, we can expect to see 45 million people displaced within the next 10 years because of ocean rising.
Ocean risings,
exactly. And then there's other countries that are turning into deserts, and losing their capacity to feed themselves. So this is happening right now with what we've already started in terms of climate change. The second moral obligation is generational. It's our children. It's our grandchildren. We're trying to make this livable for our children and survivable for our grandchildren. So we've moved to 1 degree. What the IPCC has told us is if we reach above 1.5 degrees, then we reach runaway climate change, where we have no control.
We have no control over it again.
And then all this talk about healthcare and insurance or national child care and all this stuff will mean nothing, to be quite honest with you. Because
you see, I understand the crisis, and you're right. There's this emergency to it. But it feels like like we said, the carbon footprint, the carbon tax, and all that stuff, and the carbon tax that we're trying to. And you even mentioned that you didn't like the word tax to begin with. It was kind of a incentive. But then we can name right now the 100 corporate polluters of the earth right now. Like maybe we should start attacking those corporations more so than looking at the individual Canadian, because the individual Canadian says, I recycle. Doesn't it go to big vat like somewhere where it all melts out and it comes out another plastic bottle? Like people think that that's what happens with recycling, and we're noticing that it's coming back to haunt us. That we're sending our recycling to the Philippines or to China, the Philippines. I don't know how it worked again, but so what is the long-term solution? Are there main good technologies today that can replace fossil fuels?
Absolutely, they have been for years. As a matter of fact, the green tech industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and we have governments who are buying antiquated technology, pipelines. They're sending us down a hole of bankruptcy, to be quite honest with you, because who would make that kind of investment? Every other country in the world is investing in new technologies, while our government is holding on to old technologies. And quite frankly, that's, like I said, the blue and the red team are beholden to oil interests. That's the only, I can't think of another reason why.
I believe the Liberals and the Conservatives are in bed so much with the oil companies. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
And we require that the removal of them from the equation as far as in politics in my situation to get things accelerated here. Now I do know there are other technologies like biodiesel fuel. You can make 10 gallons of biodiesel fuel to 1 gallon of refined petroleum.
Yeah, I mean the thing with biodiesel, I guess it's we want to not grow crops for biodiesel.
Yeah, I'm talking about algae.
Yeah, for sure. Algae. There's even sawdust from mills. And oil. Let's say from restaurants. Yeah, there's all kinds of places and even agricultural waste.
Like hemp as well.
Yeah, hemp's another. There are so many alternatives. Hydrogen's the other one. Hydrogen next year is supposed to be $1 trillion industry, and so there are so many photovoltaics. I mean, windows that have the capacity to absorb energy.
Yeah.
There are a ton of great ideas out there. We just need to start backing them and start investing in growing them, and same with look at our transportation industry. It's another big part of the equation that we have to look at. When we were calling for a carbon tax was called today, back in the early 2000s, we called it a fee and dividend. By the way, that was what we called it, and the reason why is because we knew any association to tax wouldn't have a very good public buy-in. So and it really isn't a tax. When you're collecting and then you're giving it all back, that's kind of a little bit different than taking from your paycheck and spending it on roads.
Yeah.
So we thought that we could be incremental with it. Bring it in and it'll be slowly rising slowly. And to this point, we would have had half of the cars on the road would have been electric, just like some of the other countries in the world. And we could have been the leaders, really, even in that technology. We could have been manufacturing here. We could have had, or at least opportunities to. And the Green Party wants to do that now with, let's say, with Canada Post, the fleet of Canada Post trucks that. Because now online shopping has gone through the roof, and that's really a big target. So there's a lot of trucks out on the road, and we need to electrify them. And so the Green Party has that actually in our platform to do the entire fleet, and hopefully also spur the other private transportation companies to do the same, with a carbon tax, but one that's substantial. The one we have now, 4 to 11 cents, is not going to do nothing. And there are critics about it, and they're right. Right now, that has to be double, triple. To really change attitudes.
And even not just redesign the car on a petroleum basis, but even redesign the car as far as all the plastics that we're using and the synthetics that we're using that are all fossil fuel based, which drives that fossil fuel need as well as our use of plastics. Now, you were talking about earlier about you're doing the small taxes, like on plastic bags, and like Japan had they only use one kind of plastics. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, like just consolidating. Yeah, I mean, we would like to see all single-use plastics gone by 2022. That's in our platform as well. Because it's just wasteful. I mean, it was funny back in the early 2000s, because I did run in 2004 for the Greens, and at that time we thought there was low-hanging fruit. We thought plastic water bottles, we have alternatives. That'll be an easy one. Let's suggest that one first.
Yeah.
And plastic bags. We could easily get rid of those because we could just use a reusable bag, right? And here we are 20 years later, and we still are wasting. We've got mounds of it everywhere.
I bring my reusable bags, dude, like as much as I can. I even have my temper, but sometimes you just, crap, you got to buy one, So, all right, okay.
It's habit, right? And the more that we get used to it, the more we get used to having them with us, or.
Yeah. or the reduce. And I think the burden should go more on corporations, actually, like on the packaging and stuff. Have you seen some of the software sometimes that it comes in? It comes like the disc is like it's a memory stick. It's about way small, and it's coming into a huge pieces of plastic. I'm like, wow, I think we've gone too far.
You would think that people that are in those industries would kind of be aware of this, like, hey, what can we do to minimize some of this packaging and actually probably save money, I would imagine.
I thought
use less of it.
Unless, there's damage to the product itself. Who knows? Yeah. Okay, so the other question I wanted to ask you, this is one of my primary questions because of all the censorship that's going on from all these tech giants, from Google to Twitter now to Facebook and to YouTube. It's unbelievable. I don't know if you know this, but YouTube has been bought out by CNN, MSNBC, and all these other corporate media companies, including Facebook Watch as well has been out by CNN because they didn't want their competitors to come in. So basically now their videos are favored onto the spool when you do a search, which is like, really, we do a UFO video on trial on DDP Vradio. So I type in UFO video, and usually the major sites used to come up. No, now it's CNN. What does CNN care about UFO? And MSNBC, it's all these news agencies. And I said, well, this is really just ridiculous as what's happening. What does Green Party stand on net neutrality? Because this is an invasion of net neutrality in my point. Oh, absolutely, and it's what happens when anything happens in capitalism that's unregulated. I mean, look at what Uber has done. Look at what Airbnb has done. Mm-hmm. So we've just allowed this. I mean, this is all this new technology, all this disruption that we're seeing, has really had a carte blanche. We didn't address any of this. Apparently, we don't care, or we don't mind. I mean, I if I was a cab driver, I'd be livid. Yeah, of course. They had their protests here in Toronto there at one point, I mean, but it didn't do much. They have an argument. I mean, they were paying licensing fees, and then all of a sudden there's a company who, by the way, doesn't pay any taxes in our own country. Yeah, none of these guys do. Uber, Netflix, all of these companies, all these new tech companies, even Google and YouTube and Facebook, none of these guys pay taxes in our country, and yet they exploit either us, personally, or through commerce, and yet they don't help to pay for the roads, and they don't help to pay for the clean drinking water like everybody else. It's almost like because the internet has spread, because there's no borders with the internet, I guess. Yeah. So there was no regulations placed. Now I know that the Green Party of Canada actually stated about Netflix should be paying taxes. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like platforms like that. All of them that, should be they should be paying their fair amount of taxes in order to contribute to the Canadian economy, since we are consumers of their products. Absolutely. And they're profiting from it. Look at Facebook. They're exercising business within Canada. So and if that's the case, that makes a sense. So that would be one of the Green Party's platforms. But as far as net neutrality, I know Green Party's been very strong on that. Oh, for sure. And keeping some of the tech giants, from controlling the internet pipes. It's what has made the internet amazing, is that we did have net neutrality, where we did have access to information that may not have been coming from the giants, from a blog. Mm-hmm. So we need that to be available, because manipulating science, for example, we've seen it for the last 30 years. There we go. And that's because the big guys have the mic. And they're the ones that have the big mic and are able to get to enough of an audience, and have been able to, quite frankly, stall any kind of public action. And that's why we're in the predicament. They basically bought the mic. Yeah, just like what Justin Trudeau did with the Liberal Party, with $695 million bailout for media companies here in Toronto. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but I know I'm not friends with the Rebel media, but I respect Ezra Levant. I know him, and I know he's got integrity on some of his journalism. Very conservative view, of course, and I don't care about that. That's fine. He's permitted to do so. Now, for some reason, all the major media companies were allowed to follow Justin Trudeau, except Rebel Media and all the fringe other internet companies who are not part of the ones that were part of the bailout. And What does the Green Party say about that? What's their position on that? Like, we shouldn't be. The freedom of the press should have the freedom of the press. They shouldn't be arrested or removed off a sidewalk, during the debates because we don't like you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, as annoying as Alex Jones was on YouTube, when they took him off YouTube, I said that was disgusting. That was horrible censorship in so many ways. Even after apologizing so many times for the Sandy Hook thing, I don't care. I think he's a kook. But he's entertaining, and so where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line?
I think you draw the line at understanding everyone's perspective, because ours may be quite different than others. I'm talking about immigrants and people of color, for example, indigenous. We as white folks have to sit back and listen sometime, or more, because all we have been done. I'm saying this because the PP. This has come up in this election because the PPC,
I wouldn't use that phrase though.
What, I'm sorry.
I wouldn't use white folk because it sounds racism in the reverse form.
It's not supposed to. We've had.
Because you're generalizing white folk, no?
Well, I am in a way because history doesn't lie. We have talked about tackling racism, and yet we somehow condone actions and speech that is hurtful, and we have to recognize that, not by trying to understand it, but trying to understand what other people are feeling, to have compassion.
I know, but you're talking about feelings. You're talking about emotions, about situations that happen.
Isn't that not important, though?
No, feelings. Your feelings are not infallible indicators of fact of the present situation. I've been hurt by black people who were racist against me because I was a gay Aboriginal man, and I was HIV positive and I was dying of AIDS, and they were completely racist against me. You white folk. To me, that's insulting to say that race is only precluded to one race. Why would you? Why would we say that? Why would you want to?
In context to something like the PPC party coming out and spending, or mind you, from
you see, they're denying. Their position is that they denied the ad itself. And I don't care. But even because a person doesn't want mass migration doesn't mean they're racist.
No, it doesn't. But it's the spirit and some of the even words that have come out of their mouth. I mean, when a society reaches a certain low in terms of socioeconomic inequity, we see this. This is history repeating itself, and it's happening in our country. It happened in the U.S. Look at what Trump was able to say about Mexicans, for example. Is that tolerable? Like, we're tolerating this. What happened with that? He actually got elected.
Oh my God, dude! This is the thing too. This is the other thing too. Donald Trump is probably the best thing that happened in the United States of America, and I tell you why. I know people like the oxygen just comes out of the room. It's like Mr. Magoo driving a bus right through a shopping mall in the United States and showing them how corrupt their politics have become. Because Hillary Clinton was just as corrupt and two-faced, and for her
we knew that, though, didn't we?
Yeah, we all knew that. but let's get back to the Canadian on the Canadian side here. When it comes to racism here, I just find the mechanism of fighting racism, intolerance with intolerance. You can't fight intolerance with intolerance. And just because somebody feels something, it doesn't necessarily make it true. Like, I feel offended sometimes by someone when black people say there's no racism amongst white people.
Yeah, but what intolerance are you speaking of?
Like, for instance, when let's take for Black Lives Matter here at my Gay Pride Parade, okay? Right. I've interviewed these ladies a lot. I'm a big advocate of their cause down in the States because I'm friends with their editor-in-chief, Paul J. from the Real News Network. So I got a good perspective. When they came here to Canada wanting to remove the cops from our parade, supporting cops, people who supported us, people who put lapels, who would buy and the money would go to Casey. We're talking about cops who actually supported us. To brush them with the same stroke and say, you're not permitted to be in our parade is like a bitch slap and say, no, you're not permitted. There was no discussion. There was just this, the mechanism itself was, it was intolerance. And you can't fight intolerance with intolerance. It says bad marketing plan, back up ladies. I even warned them about it. I says, this is a bad thing. You're putting a bad taste in Canadians' mouth and you're going to lose your cause. And guess what? They've lost their cause amongst Canadians because Canadians don't get it. It says, no, I can't talk to my black friend now without it all getting uncomfortable. You know what I mean? So because are we addressing, putting too much attention to race, perhaps? You know?
No, not at all.
In today's society?
No, because it's getting worse. We are being divided by opportunistic politicians who think that, you know, they need to find somebody to point a finger at to be successful. You know, to divide communities, to find success for themselves, which is, you know, history repeating itself. And so, you know, when we have to recognize that when it's happening, and take a stand and say, you know what, don't use this community or that community for your own opportunistic goals.
But would you ban their civil rights as a Canadian citizen to speak out?
No, not at all. And as a matter of fact, in the PPC, there was a demonstration at one of the debates, and I wasn't going to stop the PPC gentleman from speaking.
Yeah, that's honorable. I really appreciate that.
But I did want to acknowledge that people were hurt by the words of his leader, and this is what I was talking about before.
Okay, you got to take it. Hurt.
Yes,
dude.
Well,
I was hurt by 2 black nurses who wouldn't change my bedpan and nearly killed me. Okay, yeah. I said, why don't I just say, because I'm hurt from the past. I don't want no black nurses in the parade. This is what I'm talking about. If we're so uncomfortable as individuals not to hear an opposing view that may make me feel uncomfortable.
Opposing view? Is that how you see it?
Well, not an opposing view. It doesn't matter. It's a view that's not. I think it's wrong. But do they have the right to speak it? Yes. Let them speak it. As long as they're not inciting violence, they're not inciting violence, they're not inciting genocide, they're not inciting this. If the right to say it, I think, is so important, because then you can see how foolish they are in the long run.
Yeah, there are studies, though, however, that say that if you give them a pulpit, that pulpit will grow. So, you know, we have to be careful.
No, ACLU just, I told you that example. ACLU down in the United States used to allow the KKK to have their rallies and to have their their say in the podiums. And every year, because they believed in the freedom of speech. And guess what happened? The KKK started dwindling because every student started realizing how ridiculous these people are. Yeah. And then students can make decisions. I think what we do is we do a disservice to Canadians when we treat them like children. When we say, oh, we're the state and we have to baby you from this kind of language. Oh, don't worry, we're going to protect you from this kind of language. Do you not see what I'm? You know what I'm saying? Is there that's the line where I'm drawing right now?
Yeah.
Would you be open to more discussion on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, discussions.
Yeah.
We never stop learning in this world. But I have to tell you, you know.
It's a hard one, eh?
It is a difficult thing, but I want to have compassion for the people that that are the ones that are at the front line of this, the people who are feeling affected the most by this. And to do so, we need to listen. We can't just have our opinions and say it's like this, and I'm sorry that your feelings are hurt. And,
we have an old axiom here at DDP Studios. It says iron sharpens iron as one person sharpens another. Okay, no backstabbing. If I was defaming somebody's character on race behind their backs, that's wrong. Absolutely wrong. But if I was like dueling out on an idea with somebody else and we did it out and I was uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable to exercise. It's uncomfortable when I want to build muscles. It's uncomfortable when I want to get healthy. Well, it's uncomfortable to have a healthy mind. It's uncomfortable because you have to go through those feelings. And there's no restitution or forgiveness or reconciliation that will ever occur if we keep shutting down these conversations, if we keep shutting down and censoring these conversations. So that's why I'm asking the Green Party of Canada, are you open to the suggestion saying, hey, maybe we should reevaluate, opening the discussion about this issue rather than shutting down a conversation?
Yeah, but you have to take context is very important. And if you have a conversation without having any of the context behind it,
true,
then where are we? We're no further ahead.
That's right.
So I mean, the context has to be. I'm sorry.
conversation is about listening too. So
absolutely.
You know, I hear my you know, I have so many friends from so many different cultures. You have no idea, and I hear their plights, and 90% of them don't care. 90% said, "Oh, Black Lives Matter don't represent me."
Yeah.
This is, and I have a lot of friends on Facebook. My point is that are we using this racism as a form of to divide people even further, to fuel the fire? It's like gaslighting. It's like the devil himself, who actually says, "Hey, let's start a fire," and then gaslights it and just say, "Pay attention to this because this is the only issue that happens in the world." And the regular Canadians are going, what's going on? You know, they're not aware of it. And let's say the majority of Canadians. Are the majority of Canadians racist or not? That's a good question.
The majority, I don't think so. I hope not. I don't see it in my community. But is racism here? Yeah, absolutely. And we see it, you know, when we were at a debate the other night where it was pretty much a white room, and one woman assaulted a girl of color, and that's not acceptable. And yet that person sat in that room for about an hour because nobody would. But had that person been of color that did it to a white person, you could bet that she would have been dragged out of there in a minute.
I don't know.
Well,
it depends.
You know what? That's
it depends on the cops. It depends on the crowd. And it depends on the individual. It depends on the fraction.
You know, this is, and I'm paraphrasing actually. And Paul had said this, and Paul is a great guy. He's Paul Taylor is the NDP candidate, and he's black man, and he's, you know, he's the one who forwarded this, and I believe him. I actually believe him because he was shaken up by this, and you know, here he was the only black man in the room, essentially,
but that's what I'm saying. Are we not giving in to our fears when we say to ourselves, "Oh, I feel uncomfortable," and then we're not dealing with the matters of the soul? Like every individual needs to deal with the matter of the soul, and I don't think that the state has a right to be dealing with that too much. Like there's a point of where behavior has to be done from the individual. Like for one not to be a racist, it has to come from the individual. I don't think the state has a right to start saying, "Oh, you're a racist," and then this callous use of the word bugs me too. Like calling David Rubin a Nazi from the protest at the PPC. He's a Jewish gay man. He was married to another gay man. Like, you know what I'm saying? But yet that's the first thing that you see in media, and then I blame my reporter friends for not reporting the issue properly and using sensationalism to get to clickbait. Because after all, the news media is a business. It is, and they're after clickbaits, and so that's why I'm saying I think there's a fear from politicians as well. You must feel it. Dealing with this issue?
It's, you know what it is? It's difficult because, because people are looking for a magic answer or something like that, and quite frankly, I don't have it, and I don't know where you get the impression though that government should be taking care of that. Are you talking with censorship?
I'm talking about like to a point where the individual, like, we have to eliminate racism. Like these big campaigns, and sometimes where's it coming from? Is it federally funded? Do we really need that, or Canadian? Don't you think this culture needs to be to settle itself? Like, do we need so much regulation to a point of nausea? That's what I'm saying. Like, where?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think
where we got a list of words that we're not allowed to say, and a list of things that we're not allowed to do. I think we could do a much better job by actually just giving each other a little bit of respect. I mean, a government can do that by providing the social provisions that allow for a meaningful life, a meaningful, happy, and and which we can do, and that I think is what government can do, and that will cause or allow for a society to stabilize to a point where we can have discussions in a way that doesn't have distractions that are
hamstringing our conversation. You know, like if people are hurting and I'm not talking hurting. I mean in socioeconomics I'm talking about here. But people are struggling. It's pretty easy to get pissed off at find somebody to get pissed off about that your shortcomings and we talked about this already and so I think the government's biggest role that we can play is to stabilize our society, to redistribute. Nobody likes that word, especially conservatives hate that. But in a way that is sustainable, you know, and that speaks to the human rights, you know, of dignity and respect. You know, we talk about that all the time, but
it speaks to actually Martin Luther King's vision too. Before he got shot, before he was leading the Poor People's March, because he had realized right at that point, because he didn't get shot for a civil rights movement. He got shot for the Poor People's March because he had realized that it had nothing to do with race anymore. It had more to do about poverty, the inequality of wealth. And then we're back at the same issue again. And I'm glad that the Green Party does have a platform for, I believe that the universal income is probably a savior for us as far as platform goes. My last question for you before we go on, what's your big push as far as policy in helping Parkdale and High Park right now? What are the issues you're seeing here?
Well, I think locally housing is a big one. Affordability, obviously, people are saying, but you know, I would say climate as well, because we have to get ready for what we've already created, and so flooding is definitely going to be an issue that we have to think about and consider very much. And the Green Party has put quite a bit of money aside for infrastructure improvements, but housing I think is a big one. We have emergency measures, which I'm quite proud of, that will help people who are, you know, paying upwards of 60% of their income for rent, which is crazy.
It's not ridiculous.
Yeah, it's nuts. So there's emergency measures for people who are in that situation, but we also want to support in a big way co-ops and co-living, for example. We think that's phenomenal and something that's more of a best practice that's already happening in other jurisdictions around the world. But we also want to build 25,000 new builds a year and refurbish 15,000 a year as well. And we're talking net zero housing as well. So these are housing of the future. But we want to do this at least for the next 10 years. It's been about 15 to 20 years that Canada was when Canada stopped doing this, and that's why the markets are the way they are in a large part, because stocks have just dwindled down, and everybody likes to blame foreigners and foreign investment, which is legitimate as well. But we also had a government who's just stopped building housing, you know, and then there's the ad hoc billion here, billion there. Every time there's an election.
Of course.
But that's not what we need. You know, to build a sustainable society, we need long-term thinking and long-term strategies, and that's what this is. And the Green Party has a short-term for the emergency and long-term. But I mean, there's so much more. There's the pharmacare we were talking about, and national child care. These are in pre-post-secondary education. These are things that most of the other parties, or some of the more conservative type parties, would say, where are you going to get the money from? And well, we have a costed budget. You know, the Parliamentary Review Office has audited us and said, okay, you found the money and it could happen. And those are the types of things that stabilize our society and hopefully deal with the racist issues that we were talking about and the crime issues. You know, we've talked about the social determinants of health and of crime for decades, and yet every time we have a summer of the gun, which, you know, I've lived through at least 3 or 4 of them in my life. We talk about guns and restricting guns and sentencing. Those are the 2 big things that we talk about, which are legitimate. Yeah. But we never talk about the number 1 determinant, social determinants of health. So, you know, we'd rather spend 110, 120 grand incarcerating somebody than spending 30 grand on giving them a place to live and some food.
Is that funny?
You know? Yeah,
that's a good point.
It's nuts, and then on top of that, we spend all that money without, you know, rehabilitating. You know, and we expect there to be the reoffending rate to drop. You know, I think it's in Denmark where they've brought in restorative justice, You know, they have the head of the jails actually sharing meals with the inmates, you know, and showing some humanity and trying to, and their reoffender rates dropped significantly from 40% to something like 17% just in a couple of years. So this is the kind of creative best practice that we could look at, you know, and to implement in Canada in some way, and we should. It's fiscally responsible, it's socially responsible, so why wouldn't we, right?
And they're great ideas. They're great ideas from the Green Party of Canada. I'm so glad that you guys you're moving further ahead here in Canada and getting a lot more representation. So good luck on the elections on October the 21st, 2019.
Great.
Of course, I've got my election card.
Awesome.
All ready to vote. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Green Party, and you know, being part of our own talks.
All right.